want to ensure that we are protecting our market here in Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Peterborough Kawartha.
1.47 million. That's the number of Canadians who accessed a food bank in 1 month. Wow. The highest number in history, ever. 1 in 3 of those users are children. And what's the Liberals' plan for relief? More tax. They want to triple the carbon tax on groceries, triple the carbon tax on home heating, triple the carbon tax on gas. Will they commit to ending their triple carbon tax increase, or do they want more Canadians using a food bank?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for raising a very important issue. This is a matter that should concern every member of this House and actually concern all Canadians. The fact that she said that families are struggling, feeding their family, but also kids, is something that is of concern to all of us. That's why, Mr. Speaker, back in May, I asked the Competition Bureau to look at the issue that we're seeing around competition in the country, and more recently asked them to launch an investigation to make sure there's no unlawful practice. But in addition to that, Mr. Speaker, I did speak to the number of CEOs around the country to make sure they do their part to lower prices for Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Peterborough Kawartha.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the member's attempt to answer the question, but that's not an answer for why we have $1 trillion debt. It's not an answer when we have an increase in carbon tax, when 4 million Canadians rely on propane and oil to heat their home. This is not a luxury. This is a necessity. The average family is going to pay $7,000 to heat their home this winter. They have to choose between heating and eating. So again, I ask, will the Liberals finally show leadership, fiscal responsibility and compassion and stop the tripling of their carbon tax?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to quote from an article that the new Director of Communications for the Conservative Party of Canada wrote, and he said, but opposition to a policy is not a policy in and of itself. And he added, Conservatives are refusing to contribute anything to the climate change discussion other than throwing temper tantrums and scoring political points. Mr. Speaker, I agree with the new Director of Communications for the Conservative Party of Canada.
The Honourable Member for Parry Sound Muskoka.
Mr. Speaker, the NDP Liberal coalition has racked up over $500 billion in inflation-causing deficits, turning essentials like heating our home and eating healthy food into luxuries. Just as Canadians are starting to pay the high skyrocketing price to fuel their homes, skyrocketing visits to food banks are happening in Canada as well. When will this costly coalition stop hurting Canadians and cancel their inflationary spending?
The Honourable Minister of Innovation.
We would all agree that our colleague is bringing an important issue. We are all seized by the fact that the price of food in this country has been increasing. Mr. Speaker, that's why we took action. Earlier this year, I asked the Competition Bureau to look whether there would be any unlawful practice in this country. More recently, I demanded that they start an investigation to make sure that we monitor what's going on in the market. But more recently, Mr. Speaker, what matters to Canadians, we took action. I did speak to CEOs of the large grocery chains in this country to make sure they lower prices for Canadians, because this is a matter that everyone should do their part to lower prices for families.
Member for Parry Sound Muskoka.
I cannot believe how tone-deaf that answer. He's talking about cell phone bills when people can't afford to eat and heat their homes. This coalition would have people believe that more inflation-causing borrowing to give Canadians $500 to help them pay for thousands more dollars in groceries, thousands more dollars for heating their homes, and thousands more to pay their mortgage is actually a solution. It's like the left hand doesn't know what the far left hand is doing. How many Canadians have to lose their homes before they get it and cancel their inflation-causing borrowing?
The Honourable Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, maybe my English is not so good, but one thing that I'd say is I did speak to the CEOs of the grocery chain in this country, Mr. Speaker. I did speak also to the telcos, actually, to make sure that we would reduce prices for Canadians should this merger go forward. But, Mr. Speaker, beyond that, this is not a political issue, Mr. Speaker. We are concerned, they are concerned, every Canadian is concerned. What matters to Canadians, Mr. Speaker, is that we all do our parts. We ask the grocers to do their part, we ask the producers to do their part, and I've even called upon the companies who have increased prices at the time that Canadian families are struggling. We'll fight for Canadians at every step of the way.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, this government's inflationary choices are forcing Canadians to tighten their belts. The increase in the expenses of an average Canadian family with a $400,000 mortgage up to 5.5% means they'll have to pay $20,000 more this year. Mr. Speaker, will the government give Canadians some breathing room? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, I agree with my Conservative colleague that Canadian households are having trouble, and that is why we doubled the GST tax credit for 11 million Canadian households. And that is also why we voted in favour on this side of the House for measures that will put more money into Canadian families' pockets. Mr. Speaker, I still don't understand how the Conservatives can rise in this place and say that Canadians need our help, whereas they vote against the measures we put forward.